Keziah Njema stood in front of the full-length mirror in her bedroom. Her reflection was flawless: smooth skin, carefully drawn eyeliner, a tailored blouse with sharp shoulders, and an expensive watch that gleamed under the morning light. But her eyes betrayed her. Dark circles rimmed their edges. Her gaze was blank, as if she wasn't looking at herself at all but through herself. For a long moment, she just stood there, unmoving. Then she blinked, adjusted her collar, and walked away without a word. On paper, she had everything: a successful marketing executive, a well-dressed husband, a beautiful house in Kilimani. But the silence in her heart had been growing louder each year, until even her own breathing felt too loud inside her skull. She moved like a machine. Shower. Moisturize. Conceal the bags under her eyes. Dress. Heels. Coffee. Keziah's movements were precise, practiced. Each action had been repeated so many times that it no longer required thought. Her hands didn't shake, but they wanted to. Her spine stayed straight, but it took effort. She sipped her coffee slowly at the kitchen counter. The house was quiet. Frank had already left for his early meeting, or he just hadn't said goodbye. She preferred it that way. When she closed the door behind her, she paused at the porch. The sun was bright, too bright. She slipped on her sunglasses and walked to the car, her heels clicking against the driveway like nails tapping on glass. Nairobi pulsed around her. Matatas screamed past with painted slogans. Bodabodas wove through traffic like water. Giant billboards towered over narrow alleys, promising wealth, beauty, salvation. The city was noisy, fast, hungry. Inside her tinted SUV, Keziah was silent. She stared at the road ahead, the music low, some mellow jazz piece she didn't know the name of. Outside, life was chaotic and alive. Inside, she felt like she was watching everything from behind thick glass. The city moved. She just passed through it. When her car paused at a roundabout near Kenyatta Avenue, she glanced at a young woman selling flowers by the curb. The girl smiled through the window. Keziah didn't smile back. The reception area of KNL Strategies smelled of air freshener and fresh coffee. "Morning, Madam Keziah," the security guard greeted. She nodded politely and stepped into the lift, pressed the top floor, and waited. No eye contact. No small talk. Her heels echoed in the hallway as she reached her office. Inside, everything was perfect. Glass walls, awards lining the shelf, a clean desk with files neatly stacked. Her assistant brought in her morning schedule. "You have the strategy meeting with the Uganda team at 11 and the client review at 2. "Thanks, Sheila." She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began replying to emails. Her tone was sharp, her grammar perfect. Her decisions came fast. Everyone respected her. Some feared her. But no one really knew her. And that was by design. At 10:47 a.m., a knock at the door broke her rhythm. She looked up. "Sorry, the IT guy just needs to check your connection," Sheila said, holding the door open. The technician entered quietly and moved toward the router behind her desk. As he passed by, his shoulder brushed hers, just slightly. Not rude, not deliberate. Still, her entire body froze. The smell of his cologne, something musky and cheap, hit her like a slap. Her vision blurred for a moment. The air in the room felt thinner. Her hands trembled slightly, hidden beneath the desk. The technician said something, probably polite, probably nothing, but she didn't hear it. She nodded, forced a small smile, and stared down at her screen until he left. Once the door closed, her fingers stopped typing. Her chest tightened. There was a ringing in her ears she couldn't shut off. Keziah rose from her chair and walked briskly down the corridor. Her heels clicked against the tiles, sharp and steady, though her breath was not. She entered the restroom, locked herself into a stall, and sat on the closed toilet seat. Her hands trembled. She pressed them against her knees to keep still. For a long moment, she stared at the floor, trying to breathe. One breath in, one out, again. But the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were closing in. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away roughly, angry at her own weakness. "Stop it," she whispered to herself. "Just stop." When she finally stepped out to the sink, she splashed water on her face, fixed her makeup, and practiced a neutral expression in the mirror. Then she went back to her office, as if nothing had happened. Her phone buzzed just as she sat down again. "Frank." She hesitated before answering. "Hi." "Hey," he said, his tone clipped. "You're at work already?" "Yes." A pause. The background on his end sounded like a car engine. "You forgot to leave money for the gardener."
"Oh, sorry."
"I was in a rush." "It's always something," he muttered. "Anyway, I handled it. I'll be late tonight." "Okay," she said quietly. Another pause. Then, "You sound tired." "I'm fine." "Well, all right then." The call ended. Keziah stared at her phone for a few seconds before setting it down. The silence that followed was louder than the conversation had been. She tried to return to her work, but her mind stayed on the tone in his voice, flat, irritated, distant. There had been a time he used to make her laugh. That time felt like another life. When Keziah arrived home that evening, the house smelled of stew and lemon cleaner. The lights were on, and Frank sat at the dining table, scrolling on his tablet. "You're late," he said without looking up. "Traffic," she answered, setting down her handbag. They ate mostly in silence. The clinking of cutlery filled the space where conversation should have been. Frank finally spoke. "You've been different lately. I'm just tired." "You're always tired, Keziah," he said, his voice rising slightly. "You barely talk anymore.
You don't even look at me."
Is there someone else?" She looked up sharply.
"What?"
He leaned back, shaking his head. "Forget it. I don't know what's going on with you." Her throat tightened. "Nothing is going on." He gave a humorless laugh. "Right." After dinner, he went to the living room to watch TV. She washed the dishes in silence, staring at her reflection in the kitchen window, the faint outline of her face against the dark night outside. She could barely recognize herself. Later, in the bedroom, Frank was already asleep. Keziah sat at the dressing table, staring at the row of perfume bottles, a half-empty wine glass beside her. She reached for the pills in the drawer, prescribed for anxiety, though she never told anyone what that meant. She swallowed two with a sip of wine. Then another sip. Then another. The warmth spread through her body, softening the edges of her thoughts. The ache behind her eyes eased, replaced by a dull emptiness that felt almost like peace. She turned off the lamp and slid under the sheets. Frank's back faced her. She watched the faint rise and fall of his shoulders until her vision blurred again, not from sleep, but from something deeper. A noise. A voice. "Keziah, come here." The words floated through her mind like smoke. She was dreaming or remembering. She couldn't tell. In the dream, she was small. Maybe 8, maybe 9. The walls around her were pale yellow, sunlight filtering through lace curtains. A living room. A gentle voice calling her name again. "Keziah, sweetheart, come help your uncle with something." A man's shadow moved across the floor. She couldn't see his face, only the shape of him, familiar and trusted. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her heartbeat quickened. The room grew dim. The shadow moved closer, and her child self backed away. Then she jolted awake. Her body was slick with sweat. The wine glass lay tipped on the floor. Beside her, Frank groaned, irritated. "For God's sake, Keziah, it's 3 a.m. I'm sorry," she whispered, though she didn't know what for. He turned over and went back to sleep. Keziah lay still in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Her pulse was fast, her mouth dry. And for the first time in years, she was truly afraid of her own memories. Keziah didn't sleep again that night. Every time she closed her eyes, flashes of light and sound invaded her mind, shadows, footsteps, a voice she couldn't name. When morning came, she felt like she had been running for hours. She stood under the shower for too long, letting the water beat against her skin. Her hands braced against the tiles as she fought to breathe. The water scalded, but she didn't move away. It helped her stay present. Frank knocked on the bathroom door. "You're going to be late." I know, she said. Her voice was hoarse. When she finally stepped out, steam clouded the mirror. She wiped it clean with her palm. Her reflection stared back, eyes bloodshot, lips pale. She whispered, "You're fine. You're fine." Then she got dressed and went to work. That weekend, her younger sister, Mumbai, dropped by the house. She came carrying a bag of mangoes and a bright smile that dimmed the moment she saw Keziah. Kesh, you look exhausted, she said, setting the fruit on the counter. Are you even eating properly? Keziah forced a smile. I'm fine. Just work stress. Mumbai leaned against the counter, studying her. You've been saying that for months. Frank called me last week. He said you've been distant. Keziah's smile faded. He called you? He's worried. And so am I. Keziah let out a dry laugh. You don't need to be. I'm managing. Mumbai frowned. You don't look like someone who's managing. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Keziah turned away and began washing a plate that didn't need washing. Please, Mumbai. I just want a quiet day. Her sister sighed softly, picking up her bag. You can push people away all you want, Kesh, but one day, something will break. After she left, the house fell quiet again. The only sound was the faint hum of the fridge and the racing of Keziah's heart. Monday afternoon, Keziah sat in a beige office that smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. A clock ticked on the wall, slow, steady, accusing. Across from her sat Dr. Njema, a calm woman in her 50s with gentle eyes and a soft voice. So, Keziah, she began, what brings you here today? Keziah gave a short, humorless smile. My sister thinks I need help. My husband agrees. And you, the therapist asked. Do you think you need help? I think I need rest, Keziah said flatly. That's all. Dr. Njema nodded slowly. You seem very tired. Keziah looked away, toward the window. I am. They sat in silence for a while. The clock kept ticking. Finally, the doctor said, sometimes exhaustion comes from carrying something too heavy for too long. Keziah's throat tightened. Maybe. When the session ended, she walked out feeling lighter for having spoken, but also exposed. Like a wound had been touched, even if it hadn't yet been cleaned. That night, Keziah drummed again. She was small again, 8 years old, riding in the back seat of her father's old Peugeot. Her mother sat in the front, humming along to a gospel song on the radio. The road was dusty, the sun golden over the hills of Nakuru. Their house appeared around the bend, a neat bungalow with red flowers lining the fence. Everything looked warm and safe. Her father laughed as he parked the car. Her mother turned back and smiled at young Keziah. Home, sweet home. Keziah's heart swelled. She remembered that feeling. The comfort of belonging, the smell of chapati frying in the kitchen, the laughter echoing in the evening. Then, from the doorway, a familiar man waved. My favorite niece. Uncle Nick. Her child self jumped out of the car and ran to hug him. He smelled of aftershave and tobacco. His smile was wide, his arms strong. Everyone trusted him. Everyone loved him. Uncle Nick had always been around. He was her father's younger brother, funny, generous, always carrying sweets or small gifts from Nairobi. He helped with homework, took the kids for ice cream, fixed broken toys. To everyone, he was the perfect uncle. That afternoon, while the adults sat in the sitting room laughing over tea, he called from the corridor. Keziah, come help me find the sugar tin in the kitchen. She followed him willingly. Why wouldn't she? He was family. He opened a drawer, pretending to search for something. You've grown so tall, he said, glancing at her. You're a beautiful girl, you know that? She giggled shyly. Mum says I look like her. He smiled. Even better. He placed a sweet in her hand, his fingers brushing hers a little too long. She didn't understand the feeling that crept up her spine then, a confusion she couldn't name. When he turned and winked, she smiled back, because she thought she was supposed to. But even then, something deep inside her knew that something was off. The next week at work, Keziah sat in a meeting surrounded by her team. Graphs glowed on the screen. Voices rose and fell. Numbers were discussed. But her mind drifted elsewhere. Someone was speaking directly to her. She nodded automatically, but the words no longer reached her. It was as if the room had stretched thin, like sound underwater. A laugh broke out somewhere, and she flinched. "Keziah," her assistant said softly. She blinked and looked up.
What?
"We were asking about the final presentation slides." "Oh." She stared at the screen, her own work suddenly unfamiliar.
Yes. Send them to me.
I'll review." Her colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. One of them whispered something she couldn't catch. The meeting moved on, but she wasn't really there. Her fingers dug into the armrest of her chair. The bright light from the projector made her dizzy. When it was finally over, she escaped to her office and shut the door, holding her breath until her chest hurt. 2 days later, the mistake happened. The client from Kampala called the managing partner directly, angry that an important campaign proposal had gone out with the wrong budget. The error was traced back to Keziah's department, to her email. Her boss called her in. "Keziah, what's happening with you lately?"
This isn't like you.
She sat across from him, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I must have missed that attachment. I'll fix it."
You're distracted, he said.
"If you need time off." "I don't," she interrupted. Her voice cracked slightly. "It won't happen again."
He sighed. All right.
"But take care of yourself." She left his office trembling. It wasn't the mistake itself that hurt, it was what it confirmed. She was slipping, losing control of the one part of her life that had always been perfect. That night, she stayed late, rechecking every document until her eyes burned. But the shame sat heavy in her chest, like a stone she couldn't put down. By evening, the office lights were dim. She finally closed her laptop and walked to the parking lot. The air outside was cool and smelled faintly of rain. She reached her car, opened the door, and then froze. Her heart suddenly began to race. Her breath came fast, shallow. She didn't know why. The sound of a car door slamming nearby made her flinch hard. Her body refused to move. She gripped the steering wheel, gasping, eyes wide. The world tilted and shrank all at once. A guard approached. "Madam, are you all right?" She shook her head, unable to answer. Tears streamed down her cheeks without warning. "Do you want me to call someone?" She forced her voice out between breaths. No, I'm fine." He looked uncertain, but stepped away. She stayed there for several minutes, breathing in fits until the air finally reached her lungs again. When the shaking stopped, she started the engine and drove home in silence. The house was empty when she arrived. Keziah didn't bother turning on all the lights. She went straight to the kitchen, opened a bottle of wine, and poured without measuring. The first glass went down too fast to taste. The second slowed her heartbeat. The third numbed everything. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone aimlessly. Photos of smiling families, perfect vacations, success stories. All of it made her feel smaller. At some point, she laughed bitterly and whispered, "Look at you. You can't even breathe right." She drank again until the laughter turned to quiet sobs. When her hand slipped, the wine splashed onto the rug, dark red spreading like a wound. She stared at it mesmerized. Then she lay back and let the ceiling blur. In her half-drunk sleep, the memory finally sharpened. The house in Nakuru again. The same yellow curtains, the same late afternoon sun. She was lying on the couch, her head resting on Uncle Nick's lap while he watched television. "Good girl," he murmured, stroking her hair. "So pretty. Don't move." At first it felt like comfort, the kind she'd always known from family. But then his hand moved lower. She frowned. "Uncle, stop. That tickles." He laughed quietly. "It's all right, sweetheart. Don't tell anyone. This is our little secret." The sound of his voice filled her ears until everything else disappeared. The TV, the sunlight, the air. Her child self went still, not understanding, only knowing that something had gone wrong. In the present, her adult self gasped awake on the couch. Her heart pounded. Her hands trembled violently. The wine bottle had fallen to the floor, empty. She pressed both hands to her face and sobbed into the dark. Now she remembered. And she wished she didn't. She was 10 years old, sitting at the edge of her mother's bed, feet barely touching the floor. "Mama," Keziah whispered. "Uncle Nick, he touches me sometimes. In a weird places." Her mother paused mid-fold with the laundry in her hands. She looked at Keziah, her expression unreadable. "What do you mean, weird places?" Keziah hesitated. "Here." She pointed, unsure, ashamed. Her mother's jaw clenched slightly, but her voice remained calm. "Maybe he was just being playful. You know how close he is with all of you." Keziah's lips trembled. "But I don't like it." "He wouldn't hurt you, baby. He's family." A long silence filled the room. Then her mother gently placed the folded sheet aside, walked over, and pulled her into a hug. "Don't think too much, my love. You must have misunderstood." That was the end of the conversation. No one asked again. No one mentioned it. And Keziah learned to stay quiet. In the present, Keziah woke up on the couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Her mouth was dry, and her head pounded from the wine. The curtains were half-drawn, letting in sharp morning light that made her wince. The floor was a mess. The rug was stained red. Her blouse was wrinkled, her skin sticky with sweat and tears. She sat up slowly, holding her aching head with both hands. Time felt disjointed. The memory from the night before pressed at the edges of her mind, but she pushed it down, pushed it away, like she always had. She stumbled to the bathroom, rinsed her face, brushed her teeth. In the mirror, her eyes looked haunted. At 9:42 a.m., she realized she was supposed to be in a meeting. She didn't care. She called in sick and went back to bed, pulling the covers over her head, curling into herself like a child. That evening, Frank came home and found the house quiet again. The wine glass still sat on the table. The smell of stale alcohol hung in the air. He walked into the bedroom, where Keziah lay on her side, eyes open but distant. "This has to stop," he said. "You're barely here, Keziah. I don't know who I'm living with anymore." She didn't answer. He stepped closer. "You shut me out. You won't talk. You drink yourself to sleep. What the hell is going on with you?" She sat up slowly, her voice hoarse. "You wouldn't understand." "Then make me understand," he shouted. "You're acting crazy." Her face twisted. "Don't call me that. What else do you want me to say? You're ruining this marriage, and I'm supposed to just sit here and watch it happen?" "Then leave," she snapped. "If it's so unbearable, go." He stared at her for a moment, jaw clenched. "You're ungrateful," he said coldly. "After everything I've done for you." She laughed bitterly. "You mean being present in the room while I fall apart?" He shook his head and walked out. The bedroom door slammed behind him. She didn't cry. She just stared at the wall, her body still as stone. The silence in the house became unbearable. Keziah sat at the edge of the bathtub, a razor blade in one hand, her phone in the other. The phone screen was lit with her sister's name. She didn't call. She didn't want to talk. She wanted everything to stop. The pain inside her was too much, loud, raw, endless. She pressed the blade lightly against her arm, just to feel something clear, something real. But as soon as she did, her breath hitched. Her hand trembled. She dropped the blade into the sink and stood quickly, suddenly afraid. She stumbled back to the bedroom, swallowed a handful of pills, too many, too fast, and curled up under the sheets, heart pounding. Within minutes, her limbs felt heavy. Her vision blurred. The room tilted. And then nothing. Bright lights. Cold hands. A voice calling her name again and again. "Keziah, Keziah, stay with us." She couldn't respond. Couldn't speak. Voices surrounded her, urgent, clipped. Machines beeped. A mask was pressed over her mouth. Something sharp entered her arm. Then darkness. When she woke, it was to the sound of Mumbai's voice, soft and trembling. "I'm here. I'm right here, Keziah." She blinked slowly. The hospital ceiling above her was white, the lights dim. Her body felt like it had been drained of all energy. Frank stood on the other side of the room, his face pale. He didn't come closer. A nurse checked her vitals and quietly stepped out. Mumbai clutched her hand tightly.
You scared me, Kesh.
I thought we lost you. Keziah's eyes filled with tears, but no sound came out. She just closed her eyes again, letting the weight of her sister's hand anchor her to the bed. She wasn't okay,
but she was still here.
The hospital room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the occasional beep of the heart monitor. Dr. Wambua, the psychiatrist on duty, sat across from Frank and Mumbai. His voice was calm but firm. Keziah is experiencing a major depressive episode, likely trauma-induced. The overdose may not have been a conscious suicide attempt, but it was clearly a cry for help. Frank sat stiffly in the corner, arms crossed. Mumbai leaned forward, eyes red. Dr. Wambua continued, She's not just tired or sad. This has been building for years. Her behavior, withdrawal, panic attacks, disassociation, it all points to untreated trauma. From what? Frank asked, voice tight. She won't tell me anything. That's part of it. People with buried trauma often can't name it. Not right away, but it doesn't mean it's not real. Mumbai glanced at her brother-in-law. She needs support, not suspicion.
She needs help, Frank said.
Professional help. Dr. Wambua nodded. She'll need continued therapy, possibly medication. She'll stay under observation for now, and we'll assess next steps from there. Mumbai exhaled. Okay. Frank looked at the closed door behind them, his face unreadable. So, we just wait? We be patient, the doctor said. And we listen when she's ready. 2 days later, Keziah sat in a quiet consultation room, sunlight slanting through barred windows. She wore a hospital gown and a gray sweater someone had brought from home. Her hair was tied back, her face pale. Dr. Wambua sat with her again. You don't have to talk about anything before you're ready, but we do need to agree on a plan. Keziah stared at the table between them. So, what's the plan? Talk about my feelings and journal about my pain?
It's more than that, he said.
It's about facing what happened, when you're ready, and finding ways to live past it. She swallowed hard. I've spent my whole life pretending it didn't happen. How has that worked for you? Her eyes filled with tears. It hasn't. He handed her a pen. We'll start slowly.
You can speak.
Or write. Or sit silently. But we move forward, even if it's inch by inch. Keziah nodded, just once. It wasn't relief, not yet. But it was permission to begin, finally, telling the truth. The ward was quiet, sterile, and still. Keziah walked slowly down the corridor, her feet in hospital slippers, arms crossed over her chest. She passed other patients, some talking in soft voices, some staring out of windows, others curled up in corners with headphones and closed eyes. She joined a group session once.
She didn't speak.
A young man in the circle shared about losing his mother. Another woman spoke about her husband's abuse. Keziah listened, arms wrapped tightly around herself. The words passed through her like wind through a cracked wall. But something shifted. She didn't feel so alone in the dark. Later, in her room, she scribbled a sentence in her notebook. He was supposed to protect me. She stared at it for a long time, then underlined it twice. In her next one-on-one with Dr. Wambua, she sat in silence for a while. Then, slowly, she whispered, It was my uncle. He didn't move. He let the silence hold. She closed her eyes. He started when I was maybe 8.
No, 9.
He used to touch me. Tell me not to tell anyone. Her breathing grew ragged. I told my mom once. She told me not to think about it, that I misunderstood. Her voice cracked. But I didn't. I remember everything now. And it's eating me alive. The tears came then. Not quiet ones. Full, shaking sobs that racked her chest. Dr. Wambua gently handed her a tissue. You're not crazy, Keziah. You were hurt.
Deeply.
And none of it was your fault. She clutched the tissue tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping her from floating away. That evening, Mumbai visited. She brought warm clothes, juice, and a quiet energy that filled the room. They sat side by side on the hospital bed, knees touching. Keziah whispered, "I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to interrupt." "I promise." Keziah took a deep breath. Then she told her everything about Uncle Nick, about what happened, about how it started, and how long it lasted, about the silence,
The shame.
the denial. When she finished, the room was still. Mumbai's eyes were full of tears. Her hands shook. "Oh my God, Kesh. I thought if I said it out loud, I'd die," Keziah said softly. Mumbai pulled her into a tight, protective hug. "You're not alone anymore. I believe you, and I'm going to help you do whatever it takes." Keziah buried her face in her sister's shoulder and let herself cry freely for the first time. The truth had come out, and she hadn't broken. It had been 2 weeks since Keziah spoke her truth aloud. Her days in the hospital were quiet now, routine, measured, slightly less heavy. She could walk through the corridor without trembling. She could breathe without thinking about it. One morning, she met with Dr. Wambua and Mumbai in the small therapy room. The air was thick with nerves. Dr. Wambua began gently, "You've made remarkable progress. The next step is deciding what you want to do with what you now know. Healing is personal, but sometimes confrontation brings clarity." Keziah looked at her sister, who nodded softly. "I want to face him," Keziah said. Her voice didn't shake. "I need to see him look at me and know what he did." Mumbai swallowed hard. "Then I'll be right beside you." Dr. Wambua nodded. "Good. We'll plan it carefully. You're not going there for his reaction. You're going for your release." Keziah exhaled slowly. "For once, I want to speak and not be told to keep quiet." It was a bright Saturday afternoon when they drove to Nakuru. The sky was clear, but Keziah's palms were slick with sweat. Mumbai held her hand the entire drive. Uncle Nick's house hadn't changed much. The same white paint, the same bougainvillea along the fence. He came to the gate smiling, surprised to see them. My nieces. What a shock. Come in, come in." They followed him to the veranda.
Tea was served.
The smell made Keziah nauseous. After a few pleasantries, she spoke. Her tone was steady but cold. "Uncle Nick, I remember everything you did to me." He froze. Then he laughed nervously. "What are you saying, Keziah? You must be mistaken." "I'm not mistaken," she said, voice rising. "You hurt me. For years. I was a child." His smile faltered. "Now listen, don't bring shame to this family. You're confused, maybe sick." "Don't you dare," Mumbai cut in, her voice shaking with anger. "Don't you dare call her sick." Keziah leaned forward, trembling but strong. "You told me not to tell anyone. You made me believe it was my fault. But it wasn't. And I won't carry your secret anymore." Uncle Nick's face darkened. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," she said. Then she stood up, her heart pounding. "You can lie to yourself, but I'm done lying for you." They walked out together, leaving him speechless on the veranda. Keziah didn't look back. The next day, they met at their parents' house. Her mother, father, and 2 aunts were there, the air thick with tension. Keziah sat straight-backed on the couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Mumbai sat beside her, silent support. "Mama," Keziah began softly, "I told you once, years ago, that Uncle Nick was touching me. You told me to forget it." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "I thought you misunderstood. He was my brother." "I couldn't." "You chose not to see it," Keziah interrupted, voice trembling. "You chose him over me." Her father looked down, ashamed. "We didn't know what to do. It was the family. You protect family by facing truth, not hiding it," Keziah said. "All my life, I thought silence was safety, but it was killing me." Her mother began to cry openly. "I failed you." "Yes," Keziah said simply. "But you can still help me now, by believing me." Her father reached over and took her hand. "We believe you, Keziah." She nodded, tears finally breaking through. That's all I ever wanted. When Keziah was finally discharged, Frank came to pick her up. He looked thinner, quieter, humbled. The drive home was silent until he finally spoke. I read the doctor's report, he said carefully. And Mumbai told me about your uncle. Keziah looked out the window. So now you know. I'm sorry, he said softly. I didn't understand. I thought you were just shutting me out. I didn't see you were drowning. She stayed quiet for a moment, then asked, Do you still think I'm crazy? He shook his head, eyes wet.
No.
I think I failed you too. Keziah sighed. I don't know what happens to us now. We start over maybe, he said. If you'll let me try.
She didn't promise anything.
But she reached out and rested her hand briefly over his. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Weeks later, the whispers began. Uncle Nick stopped showing up at family gatherings. People talked quietly about what Keziah said. Her mother stopped defending him. One of her cousins, another niece, confided that he had once made her uncomfortable too. It spread. Soon, he was no longer welcome at church. His business partner cut ties. Keziah didn't push for a court case, not yet. But truth had found its own way of punishing him. One evening, she received a message from her mother. He called, asking for forgiveness. I told him to pray for it, not expect it. Keziah deleted the message without replying. Some debts were too deep for words. Time passed, not quickly, but forward. Keziah continued therapy. Some days she spoke easily. Other days, she sat in silence. Both were part of the work. She started taking walks in the hospital garden. Then back home, she made routines, tea in the morning, journaling at night. She stuck to her medication, tracked her moods. She learned to say when she wasn't okay, without shame. She joined a trauma support group, reluctantly at first. But soon, she found comfort in hearing others name what had hurt them, and in being able to do the same. She picked up small joys again, listening to old records, watering her houseplants, cooking with Mumbai on weekends. One afternoon, she laughed. Not a polite laugh. A real, unguarded one. It startled her, but she let it come. It was a quiet Saturday. Frank had taken a trip to visit his parents. Mumbai was out of town. Keziah stood alone in the bedroom, staring down at the drawer where she kept the old bottle of pills. She opened it slowly. Inside, painkillers, sleeping tablets, half-used prescriptions. And at the back, a small razor blade tucked inside folded tissue. Her hand trembled as she reached for the blade, but not to use it. She wrapped it in the tissue again, placed it in a paper bag along with the wine bottle she hadn't touched in weeks, and walked them both outside. At the gate was the trash bin. She stood there for a moment, then dropped the bag inside. She didn't feel triumphant, but she felt lighter. Inside, she opened the windows wide and let the light in. Frank came home that night to a house that smelled of food and lavender. They ate in comfortable silence. The tension that once filled the room had thinned. It hadn't vanished, but it no longer suffocated. After dinner, they sat on the couch. Frank hesitated, then asked, How was your week? Keziah looked at him, really looked. His eyes held something new. Not pity, not guilt, just presence. She answered honestly. It had good days. And bad ones. He nodded. I want to be there for both. She didn't reply right away. But after a long moment she said, Okay. They didn't touch. No dramatic gestures. Just sat in the quiet, breathing the same air, without pressure. It was enough. Early the next morning, Keziah stood at her balcony, wrapped in a shawl, a cup of tea in her hand. Nairobi stirred below, cars honking, children laughing somewhere in the distance, a dog barking. The sun rose slowly over the skyline, warm and steady. She took a deep breath. Her reflection in the window glass looked different now, not perfect, but alive. Behind her was everything she'd survived. In front of her was everything still uncertain. But she was here. And she was not broken. Not anymore.